So Astrobot was considered to be the best video game of 2024, depending on who you ask. I know it won various awards for best video game in 2024, this past year in 2024. And and I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's definitely one of those games that it's no question that it's fun, it's addictive, it's something that PlayStation needs to have more of in relation to video games because I feel like Astrobot is one of those games that feel like an actual video game. It's not one of those games that just feels like real life simulation that people say is great and people overrate the hell out of it. Astrobot kind of reminds me of that old formula of video games that Sony used to have back in the day with games like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, where you had a mascot and it was basically a platform action type of game where players got to adventure through different levels and they were working towards, I guess, completing the game or whatever. And and honestly, I feel like that's what Astrobot reminds a lot of people of, including myself, which is probably why a lot of people enjoyed it. But the thing is, like back in the day, you look at games like Spyro the Dragon, and you look at games like Crash Bandicoot, those games actually did really well in terms of sales. I mean, they actually did like record sales following their respective releases back in the 90s. And like for example, like Crash Bandicoot from 1996 did like 6.8 million in terms of sales, and I believe that was the game from 96. So that was like the first installment within the series. Spyro the Dragon, I think Year of the Dragon, the one from 2000, that game did like at least 3.2 million in terms of sales, and the original Spyro the Dragon game did like 4.8 million in terms of sales at least. And you look at Astrobot, the game came out back in September of 2024, and thus far, I think it's only did like 1.5 million in relation to overall sales. And that was a number that was reported back in November of 2024. And since then, I haven't really heard anything from Sony or anything about any updates to the game's overall sales. And if that is the case, then I find that a bit troubling because Astrobot is like this great game that everybody's talking about that rivals the likes of Super Mario Odyssey in terms of gameplay and all that stuff. I wouldn't go on record and say that this game is better than Super Mario Odyssey, but I do feel like it somewhat resembles it enough to a point where people can talk about it within high regard in relation to Super Mario Odyssey. But yeah, I feel like this right here is something that Sony should have given us a long time ago on their main console because Astrobot has been around since 2013, I believe. So it's been around since the PlayStation 4 era of gaming. So that's last generation. And honestly, like since then, I think we've gotten like 5, Astro games, including the Playroom VR game from 2016. So, Astrobot is like the 5th installment within its series, and I feel like it should have sold way more than it did. But, we may have to sit back, give it some time to, sell more overall. I don't think it's going to I don't think it's going to rival like anything that Nintendo has put out in terms of sales, especially within the Super Mario franchise, because Super Mario has been selling millions since the 80s, early 90s. And and I've talked about in like previous videos that this character that they have might be Sony's new official mascot, but I don't think he's going to be able to rival the likes of Mario or even Sonic the Hedgehog in terms of popularity. And I feel like this series is something that probably should have started a long, long time ago, probably like in the 2000s, because at least by now it would probably be a household name to a point where they can make a television series or a movie series or whatever to this particular franchise. But I don't know. I mean, Astrobot for the most part, like the games are The game is solid as hell, and the previous games are also pretty good as well. But I feel like this is like the first installment within the franchise that's gotten a lot of mainstream attention because prior to this, a lot of people weren't really talking about the Astro series at all. And some people look at it like, Astrobot was kind of like the best of a bad situation because 2024 wasn't necessarily a bad year for gaming, but it wasn't a good year either. It wasn't as good as 2023, but it was better than 2022. And we did get some good games, from 2024 that people speak highly of, and I feel like for the most part, like if this game had come out back in 2023, it probably would have gotten overshadowed. If this game came out in 2022, I still feel like it would have been the best video game of that year. But yeah, I feel like the sales for this game is a bit lackluster, especially considering the fact that the game came out like a few months before the holiday season. So I mean, I don't know. You would think that like the sales for Astrobot would have like shot up during like Black Friday or sometime in December, like right before the Christmas season. But Astrobot, for the most part, is more of a family friendly type of game. I think it's rated E, if I'm not mistaken. And if that's the case, that's probably why it didn't do so well in terms of sales because a lot of people who play the PlayStation 5, they're young adults, they like, M-rated games that include blood, gore, and violence, and all that stuff. And those are the games that tend to sell the most. If not that, it'll be like T-rated games. And and I don't know. I just feel like having E-rated games on Sony consoles is more of a '90s thing because back in the day, Sony had launched their first console. They were trying to appeal to just about everyone because they were just getting their start within the gaming industry. And it makes me wonder whether or not Sony should go back to that, go back to trying to make more E-rated games and trying to appeal to casuals and all that stuff. But at the same time, I mean, I feel like they have to go in the route where they have to stick towards catering to young adults because it doesn't seem like Microsoft is going to be in the console wars that much longer if they haven't already pulled out. And they're going to be doing the same thing Sega did in terms of just being a third party video game publisher because the Xbox Series X was rumored to be their last video game console because they're supposed to be focusing on cloud-based gaming. And the thing is, I doubt that Sony is going to be able to rival Nintendo in terms of making video games that appeal to children and that caters to the casual audience. So unfortunately, like Astrobot, despite how good it is, despite the fact that gamers and critics, love it and that has like 80 plus levels and all that stuff, I feel like it's a game that didn't do as well in terms of sales, mainly because it catered to the wrong audience. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing because it's still a really a good game, but I don't know. It's not going to sell more than some of the other titles that we have on the PlayStation 5, like, the God of War Ragnarok game. And and I do feel that it's rather unfortunate. I feel like Astrobot is something that pays homage to an era of gaming that people were quite fond of back in the day. But I don't know, times have changed and I don't know, I feel like for the most part, like Astrobot, if this game came out about 10 or 15 years sooner than it did, it probably would have been a bigger success. It probably would have sold more initially. That's not to say that the sales for this game is not going to go up in the future, but I don't know. It's been like I don't know. It's been like 5 or 6 months, and I don't think it's sold nearly as much as it should have, and I do find that to be a bit problematic. That's not to say that the sales are necessarily poor, because it's still one of the best-selling video games for the PlayStation 5, and doing like a 1.5 or 2 mil in this day and age is actually considered to be decent because the bar has been lowered in relation to gaming, and there's a lot of video games that be lucky to sell like 3 million copies in terms of sales, and then you have video game developers and companies companies that use different metrics on how they measure the success of their video games. Sometimes they use how much revenue the game earned opposed to how many copies it sold, because it seems like as time goes by, um, video game developers and video game companies are focusing more on stuff like player count and how much money they've earned. And it's going to get to a point where we're going to stop getting physical copies of video games. So you're going to have to use something else other than copies in order to determine the success of a video game and all that stuff. But yeah, Astrobot, I feel like, is a really fun platform, adventure game and all that stuff. But it's definitely a game that should have sold more, especially considering the time that it was released. And I'm certain that we're going to get a sequel for this game sometime in the future, probably on the PlayStation 6. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised that this game didn't end up selling more than it did after its release this past September.